I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you today about healing. Healing is a major part of metaphysical philosophy, and in today's world, we talk a lot about mind, body, spirit healing and the connectiveness that we have and the reality that we are more than our physical being, we are more than our spiritual being, we are more than our mental states and ideas and emotions. And so as we bring the mind, body, and spirit together, we'd like to talk to you today about the healing process and the fact that no matter what your healing need is, and whether it is physical or spiritual, psychological, emotional, material, whatever it is, that you can be healed. And as we begin this process, we begin by saying, as we often do, that we're not talking about anyone changing their spiritual ideas or their faith tradition. We're talking about universal principles that are taught in metaphysical philosophy that can be applied to a variety of faith traditions, and most definitely applied to the realities of daily life. And the practical aspects of the teaching is tremendously important to us, isn't it, Iris?
Yes, it is indeed. And when we stay centered, we stay healed. When we are experiencing a physical problem, a mental problem, we are off center. And sometimes we wonder, what is this? What's going on here? And sometimes we can figure it out, and sometimes we never do know the basic reason. But we know that we've been off in some way, don't we?
Mm-hmm. We do. We feel it. Of course, in the physical sense, it's usually the easiest because we're able to see, or if we don't see it, in some cases, doctors tell us. And we could make some mention of that. And of course, we're not here to beat up doctors necessarily. But it is interesting that so often people who don't have seeming symptoms, once they're told that they have a disease or an illness, will sometimes manifest it. And that, of course, doesn't happen all the time. And we're also not saying that people oughtn't to have physical examinations and believe what their doctors say. But we are saying that very often we behave in the physical sense. In other words, our physical bodies respond to what we're told in mind. Mm-hmm. And so our minds set in motion the reality of this fact, when in fact it may be true, but as we are able to balance our mind, body, and spirit connection, if we have a physical ailment or illness or disease, often the mind and the spirit can help that. If we have a mental problem or disturbance, then the physical aspects can help that, sometimes we know. And we also want to be real clear in the process that today, as we talk about mind, body, spirit healing, and as we talk about mental healing, we're not talking about people who have serious clinical mental illness. And for those people, there is no question about the fact that there is clinical help for them. But we're talking about those of us in daily life that are faced with illnesses of mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, and so often we look for the reason back of it, and it's good to look briefly to see if we've done something that we might have done differently. But as a rule, illness happens and we don't know exactly what brought that on, and that's not the important part. The important part is living the life so that we will be healed. And we can be healed in body when we're healed in mind, but it has to go together, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And we have to be receptive to the healing process.
Yes.
And by receptive, we simply have to be open to the fact. And I think that in some instances, we're faced with illness, and we just don't believe there's any hope. And some people find themselves in that situation. And I think as long as we stay in that situation, then certainly the manifestation of the disease is going to continue and is going to be very much determined by our mental state. And of course, one of the things that we believe in metaphysical philosophy is that everything is determined by our mental state, including our relationship with the divine, that our minds are really creating either for us the heaven or the hell, the happiness or the sadness, and the experiences that we go through in life take us through those emotions, but the way that we think about them, the way that our mind dynamic operates, will really determine how devastating these things are to us.
Yes, and there are those people who always look for a reason for everything happening, and so what did you do that you ought not to have done? There is what they're essentially saying, which is really irritating because it could be something that that person would have no conception of. It could be something that started in another life. It could be something that we're manifesting in order to help another person. And so to be judgmental in that way, I find it very unseemly. And there are certain new thought groups who will always look for the obvious reason, which might not be the underlying cause at all. So we can just save our energy and not do that, but we can see what do we need to do, what we need to do differently in our thinking pattern. Have we been worrying too much? Have we not been eating properly? Have we been sending out negative energy? And usually, that is one of the biggest problems for minor illnesses of debilitation. Because we're not using our energy, we're sending it out in all directions instead of using it for our own good.
Exactly right. We all have energy. We all
Yes.
have so much energy.
Yes.
We all have the same amount of energy.
Yes.
Actually, we don't feel that we do, but and some of us are stronger and weaker. But from the standpoint of energy, we all expend our energy every 24 hours and in the course of our lifetime. And how we spend our energy, in a lot of cases, determines our health. And for a lot of us, we spend our energy in negativity, and we spend our energy worrying, and we spend our energy fretting and fearing and not forgiving, and all of these negative emotions. And that uses up so much energy that there's no more energy left to do any of the restorative things that need to take place in our mind and in our body and in our spirit. It's a little bit like rest. We all have to get the rest that we need. And one of the things that we see so often with people who are negative is that they're always exhausted, always tired. And of course they are, because they've used all of their energy to feed this negativity. And even if they sleep, they're tired, because of course when they're awake, they're using all of their energy and they're being consumed by this negativity. And it's negativity about all manner of things, negativity about things that have happened in the past, negativity about issues that haven't been resolved within their family and within their relationships, bitterness, hurts that they are not willing to let go of, all of these things. And when we talk about being healed and we talk about illness, so often we think about physical illnesses, and certainly we're talking about that, but illness goes much deeper, doesn't it?
Yes, of course it does. And we know that there are those people who manifest illness for a specific reason, to help other people, to help others see a fault within themselves or a new way of life. And so we just need to, first of all, be totally non-judgmental of others and just accept, yes, that person has whatever it is they have, and see where things go. But you and I have both seen many people who have been quite ill, and we all have to die sometime. We're all going to die. And we've seen many people who've come to the end of their lifetimes, and those who go through their death process gracefully and graciously. And it's such a beautiful thing to see when they don't fight any longer, but they just accept, and then they don't have pain. And I know that it's the fighting, the resisting, and the fear that creates a great deal of the pain. And we've seen that happen over and over when people are calm. I know one lady who had multiple myeloma, cancer of the bone marrow, who didn't complain and didn't seem to have a lot of pain. And you could tell by that lady's face that she really didn't experience that much pain. And yet doctors say that is the most painful of all diseases. And the very fact that the patient who has that dread disease knows that it's one of the worst, then they dread it most of all. But if we can all just be calm and peaceful throughout the time of healing, then we will be healed. And we might not be healed in body because it might be our time to go, but we will be healed.
Absolutely. And the healing actually is something much more much deeper than what we see on the surface.
Yeah.
And you just spoke of the lady, and we've all seen, or those of us who've been in the ministry and in counseling work for a long time, have seen people with a variety of diseases and illnesses, both physical, mental, and psychological, spiritual, that are dealing with them in different ways. And this issue of pain is a really important one, I think, because a lot of things in our lives are painful, and a lot of diseases are painful, and yet there are people who are able to bear that in a very tranquil way, and are able to come to grips with the fact that this painful experience need not be so hurtful as it is for other people. And then there are others who are just so immersed in the pain that it just gets worse and worse and gets unbearable. And I think it's important for us to caution people at this point in time that we're not at all suggesting that if people have the right kind of faith or the right ideas that they won't suffer. But it does mean that there are techniques that can help people. And certainly there are diseases and illnesses and experiences that are horrifically painful. And so we don't want to make light of that at all, but we do want to make people aware of the fact that by centering themselves, and one of the things we spend a lot of time about in this program and at the church and center talking about is how we can center ourselves in the peaceful presence of the divine, in the peaceful presence of being at one with the presence and the power of God. And when we're able to do that, how we are healed, regardless of what is happening with the body.
Yes, and we've both seen it with different patients who were fearful for a time, and then as they grow less fearful, because they are not resisting their illness as much, and that all goes hand in hand, and then their pain is lessened. And I've seen it happen over and over. As a hospice volunteer for 10 years, I saw so much of that, and it was very obvious that those who just accepted that what will be, and maybe they didn't, like one lady said to me, I don't want to die, but I've outrun this old body of mine. I'm 80 years old, and I know it's my time to go. And it was. She had had heart bypass surgery with a pacemaker installed, and she developed cancer, and it's obvious that her body was worn out. But she went so peacefully and happily. And so we can all, and those who are listening to us can all think of people in their own lifetime, in their own lives, who go gracefully or who go through an illness gracefully, and so that they're not feeling a lot of pain. So we can, and even in little things, not just a physical illness, but just day-to-day life, turmoil and travail, if we stay calm and peaceful, then we can bear all things ever so much better.
Absolutely, and by being centered in the presence and understanding and realizing that there is a way, we can be empowered and strengthened. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing with you today.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807, and we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about healing a broken heart. And I think, we spend a lot of time talking about healing, physical healings, but healing of an emotional problem or a financial problem is also a challenge that we're faced with as human beings, aren't we? And healing that broken heart seems to be something that is the hardest, isn't it? Because it requires us letting go. And it may be a broken heart because of a relationship that's ended. It may be a broken heart because of something that someone has done, someone whom we love very much. It may be a broken heart because of the loss of a loved one, which is a devastating event in life. And so the healing of our broken heart, or we can actually say the healing of our brokenness, is a really important part of claiming the healing of life, isn't it?
Yes, and sometimes we need signs from heaven that tell us that things are going to be all right. And sometimes we get those signs. And as you were speaking, I was remembering one time when I went through crisis in my own life, and I was going on in life alone instead of with a husband by my side. And I was walking one day, and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to manage all the many intricacies that my husband has taken care of in the past. And and the fleur-de-lis is my symbol because the iris was derived from the fleur-de-lis. So I looked up in the sky as I was walking, and one half of the sky was filled with a giant fleur-de-lis. It was a perfectly shaped fleur-de-lis. And so I wouldn't have to be terribly bright to realize that, well, this was the symbol and sign that I had hoped I would have. And I hadn't even asked God, send me a sign, but we all want symbols and signs in our lives. So we sometimes have symbols and signs appear to us that we ignore. We think, no, it's our imagination. It couldn't mean anything. And the same is true with dreams. We can very often get our answers in our dreams because the answer comes in the dream because we're getting out of the way of our egotistical physical aspect of being and just being. And so as we do that, then truth comes through, and very often it has to come through in our sleep at night because we can't step aside during the day. But whenever we are going through problems, we need to look at every aspect of life and know that there's always help available.
Mm-hmm. And that help is available from the most unsuspecting sources.
Yes.
And that we find it in simple ways. And I think as we heal our brokenness so often, for different people, the healing process begins in different ways. For some, for instance, with the loss of a loved one or the end of a relationship, for some people it is the remembrance of something that was important to the relationship or to the person. Others, as you know, we deal with people who have a loss and they can't bear to look at the picture, and yet others get great solace from the picture. Some people don't like a song, a particular melody. Others are just attached to that. And I think that we can go to extremes on both sides. And one of the things that I talk to people, especially who have lost a spouse or loved one, about when we see this attachment, for instance, to a cemetery or attachment to a photograph or something. So these attachments can become too extreme, but I think that they can be used, these points of contact, the fleur-de-lis, the music, a familiar scent, a familiar place, for us to connect again with the happiness of that relationship and the happiness of the time. I was just thinking, as you were talking about the story you just shared, how often, as we've talked to people who have lost loved ones to death, how they will say invariably, I don't know how I can go on. I don't know, as you were saying, I don't know how I can manage. Life will never be the same. And of course, as we talk to these people, all without fail, and individuals, as time goes on, then they do deal with it, and life is lived again. And certainly the relationship is never the same, and the memory and the hurt is still there, and sometimes it's fresher than other times, but life does go on. And I'm thinking of a man that I talked to some years ago whose wife died after a very debilitating and very painful illness, and he just said, I can't go on, and he went through many, many months of depression, serious clinical depression, and had to be treated by mental health professionals and psychiatric help for it. And then sometime later, in his case it was a long time after that, but he was telling me this story some years later. He said, I was standing in the shower and I was listening to the radio, which was on in the bathroom where I was taking the shower, and he said something funny was on the radio, and he said, I laughed. And I hadn't heard myself laugh in a long time. And he said, I didn't believe that I would ever laugh again. And of course, he did laugh again, and his life went on. But those kinds of points of connection, and as you said before the break and when we came back, believing in the face of illness, in the face of disease, in the face of hurt, in the face of brokenness, in just believing that there's a way through. And that we have to go through the grieving process. We have to go through the pain. And we have to go through the tears. And those are things that we don't ever want to stop. Because those experiences help us to get in touch with ourselves, to get more closely in touch with the circumstance, the situation, or the individual, and help us to get in touch with the divine, don't they?
Yes, they help us to be the person we came here to be. And we have to go through a lot of changes in our lives before we're the person we came here to be and to accomplish what we came to accomplish. And we can accomplish whatever it is from day to day, from week to week, from month to month, from year to year. It's an ever ongoing process. But if we stop that process at any one point in time, then it creates a stagnant atmosphere there in the body, in mind, body, and or spirit. So we need to know that we're capable of doing whatever needs to be done. And some people say God doesn't give us more than we can bear, but we can just say that we're all capable of doing whatever we need to do. And if we truly believe that and just go on that premise, then we'll very soon find that we're more victorious than we ever dreamed possible.
Absolutely. And not to be afraid of the things that we have believed to be negative.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about crying right now. And I'm thinking about the fact that probably one of the greatest gifts that we have as physical beings, one of the greatest spiritual gifts that we have as physical beings is crying. And now, obviously, we don't want to be crying all the time. And so we have to weigh that. And it can, of course, be a sign of depression and some other things. But for most of us in our lives, we're going to have some tears. And in a lot of cases, those tears are wonderful things because they break down the things that aren't real. They help us to confront the things that are real, and what are real are the way our feelings and our emotions, the way that we feel, and the memories that we have, and the hurts that we have, and the anger that we have. And so tears are a tremendous, tremendous gift from God. And so I often caution people, and so often when we talk to people after a death, I'll say, "When have you cried?" "Well, I haven't cried yet." Well, that's a problem. And so we really need to understand that grieving and tears and crying and acting out to a point, but certainly tears are nothing to be avoided. And I think we need to cry more. And I think, if you don't have a good cry every 6 months, then I think it's a good process of life, and it helps us to get in touch with how things are going and how we're feeling. And so I would really, really encourage people to not be afraid of the negative emotions and not be afraid to cry and to express those things that we believe to be negative, because there's certainly nothing negative about tears.
Exactly. And scientists have shown us that the tears wash out certain chemical aspects in the body, and so they're cleansing, and they really do wash out negativity from the body. So if we can remember that, we can know that tears should be welcomed.
Sure. Go and have a good cry. That is a good experience. And if someone receives a horrible diagnosis that they have cancer, for instance, or they've experienced a loss, or we've got a job that I've had for 30 years and I've lost it now, or I'm on the verge of losing my house. And I mean, there are a whole myriad of illnesses and hurts that can be helped by just feeling that emotion and letting it out. And for a lot of people, it doesn't have to be a very demonstrative thing. I remember reading an autobiography or a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt, and she was talking about her life, and that when she was a young girl in finishing school, that one of the wonderful things that she learned in the European finishing school that she went to was to go in anytime you're upset, go into the bathroom, turn all of the taps on, flush the toilet, and have a good cry, and then come back out as though everything is all right. And I think there's something to be said about that. And it is that is could be a private time. It, in many cases, needs to be a private time, but it has so much power and so much ability to strengthen us. And so we certainly ought not to be afraid of it. And in we're kind of getting to the end. What we want to talk about, too, is I think the importance of deep breathing, centering ourselves, and prayer and meditation. Really important, aren't they, Iris?
Yes, they are. But I'd like to say, too, that tears can sometimes be tears of joy, and that's also a release. So we need to get the release any way we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just as we need to take any aspect of prayer and meditation and centering in our lives and use it in every aspect of life, because there's never a time that we don't need to be more centered, because most of us don't are not able to just live life with the equilibrium we would like to. So it has to be a deliberate plan, doesn't it?
It does. It has to be a deliberate plan, and there's never any loss from the issue of simply taking a few deep breaths and going into a meditative state. And I think it's important, too, that we say that prayer doesn't do it all. And for so many of us in the West, we believe that if we could just pray it away, and that but prayer is about a busyness. Prayer is about dialogue and talking to God, and certainly there's a place for that. But there's also a place for just being quiet, and just being quiet in the presence and the power of the divine, and that's tremendously important.
Yes, but even meditation is an active, very often active. We're listening. Prayer is talking to God. Meditation is listening. But there's that aspect of meditative state too, where we're just being, where we just learn to be, and that's the ideal, isn't it? If we can just be. So we're not being anything. We're just being ourselves. And if we can bring ourselves to that point, we're more apt to be healed. We're more apt to not develop an illness, and we're more apt to be a wonderful companion in life to our families and friends and work associates. Because the more calm and serene we can stay, the more we are attuned to the divine within, isn't it?
And absolutely true. And as we're attuned to the divine, we understand and realize that the ultimate healing for you and me and every one of us is death. And so we have to understand that all of us are going to make that transition. And the ultimate healing of life is death itself. And so we see healing and we claim it all the way, and then we claim it to the end of this life when we close our eyes to this life and open them to the next. And Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you ideas and concepts about being healed. And we hope that you draw upon your own spiritual resources to claim the healing that is always yours in the midst of wherever you are. And we hope that this has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. And we will rush this month's selection to you. Dr. Costello and Dr. Freelander always welcome your questions, comments, and prayer requests. Please address your requests to P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.